Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games. Today's video corresponds with the German Game of the Year announcement, which I think happens tomorrow, although it's close to tomorrow in the U.S., since they'll be announcing it over in Germany. I've already talked about the Kennerspiel nominees and my favorite games amongst all the Kennerspiel nominees over the years, but the award goes even further back. For the Game of the Year award goes even further back, much further back. And so today, per the request of several of you, I thought I'd go back through and look at all the games that have been nominated over the years for this award and talk about my top 10 favorite games in that area. Before I get started, let me do a quick honorable mention to a few games that made my list, but not quite my top 10. Codenames, Imhotep, The Game, Dominion, Pandemic, and Carcassonne. All of them were very close. I would say probably Carcassonne was the closest of all of them to get into the top 10, but my top 10 just barely nudged it out. Start with my number 10, and that is Hanabi. Hanabi has to be, I think, one of the most original games on this list. As far as I'm aware, I don't think there was a game like Hanabi that preceded it. And Hanabi, it's a fully cooperative game, which seemed to actually be a trend on many of these nominations. There were a lot of cooperative games, way more than I thought. It's a cooperative game where you cannot see your own hand of cards, and you are trying to play all the cards in the game by helping out each other with clues, with very strict restrictions. I have only played one perfect game of Hanabi, and it was very memorable. It was at Gen Con. It was right after Antoine Baza signed my friend's copy of the game. Not that I was looking at this copy. It's not this copy. He signed it, and we played it immediately afterward and won a perfect game of Hanabi. We've never done that since, but it's one of those games that's super easy to teach, and it flips a core idea of a game on its head. Since then, other games have come out with this mechanism, but I love that mechanism in Hanabi where you can't see your own hand of cards and you're trying to help other players play their cards in the right order. So that's Hanabi, my number 10. My number 9 is Stone Age, one that I used to own. I probably still would own it, but I played it with some family members who were really curious about it. They really enjoyed it, and so I ended up giving it to them. I think that's how I got rid of it. I'm pretty sure it was a family giveaway. Stone Age is a classic worker placement game. It inspired viticulture to a certain extent because it was one of the first worker placement games that I played, and it's a game. Well, there's a lot that I enjoy about the game, but really it's just a solid game. I really like how the worker placement works in it. Limited worker placement spots, but you can place a bunch of workers in one area to gather a bunch of resources all at once. I like the resource conversion. I like the cards that come out that let you spend some resources to get a one-time ability or several abilities all at once. And actually, it's one of those cards that I think might be my favorite mechanism. There's a card type where all players benefit from it if you buy it, but you get first pick of those benefits. And so you typically get the best benefit and other players get other benefits. And that best benefit can be quite good. So I really like that specific card. It shows up a few times in Stone Age. My number 9 game of the year. Actually, I didn't write down if these were the nominees or the winners. They're somewhere in there. At one point, they were all nominees. My number 8 is Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is another game that I used to own, gave to somebody else, but a friend has it. Really, really enjoy Ticket to Ride. It's one of the kind of the classic modern board games that I am still eager to play. If someone wants to play it and get it to the table, I am still happy and eager to play Ticket to Ride whenever that opportunity arises. Because it's so ingrained into me into how it works. I love how simple the turns and mechanisms are. I really like the interaction in the game, how there is direct interaction in the game. It's fairly rare because you have limited information. It's fairly rare that you're actively going to go after someone. It's hard to spite someone or really to block them. Although some of you might disagree with that. But I think because of that limited information, it's a little bit hard to do that. And it's just a great game. I love the feeling of accumulating certain cards. I love the feeling of drawing from the top of the deck and drawing that wild card sometimes when you actually can end up with 2 cards in one turn. Instead of just drawing one wild card, one face-up wild card, you draw from the top of the deck and end up with a wild card and then get another card. I really, really like that. That's Ticket to Ride, my number 8. My number 7 game is Spendor. This is kind of a new classic engine building game. One of my favorite just straight out engine building games. It's a game where you are acquiring cards and some tiles, and you're accumulating these chips to pay for the cards. But as soon as you have a card, that card counts as a gem of a certain color from then on whenever you want to buy anything. And so there's this feeling of progression in the game that just feels really, really good as you're getting these cards. Spendor's a weird game in that it can be essentially played in complete silence. And so there are moments in Spendor where I am so immersed in the game, but I realize, hey, we actually have not talked to each other in like 20 minutes. But I don't mind when I play Spendor because I really, really like that sense of progression and building up, and kind of, it's a race. You're racing to the end to get a certain number of points. Yeah, that's Spendor. That's my number 7. Really, really love that game. My number 6 is Camel Up. I've played both the original version, and more recently I've played the new version. The new version has some crazy camels that go in different directions. I think one of them goes forwards, one goes back. They might both go back. But I love the camel stacking mechanism in the game, and I love that you are not a camel. This was my original My Favorite Mechanism video, and I think this is actually one of my first My Favorite Mechanism videos, in that you represent someone who's betting on the camels, but you are not a camel itself. So throughout the course of the game, you are rooting for different camels at different times, and you're manipulating how those camels how those camels move forward, benefits that they get during the game. And I love the idea that they can actually stack on top of one another. So you might look like you're completely out of the race, and then suddenly you jump on top of another camel, or the camel that you've been betting on ends up on top of a camel, and that other camel moves it forward. It feels like a little bit like craps, which I don't think I've ever actually played at a casino, but the feeling of craps where everyone's or many players are cheering for a certain thing to happen that impacts all of you, even though it's a competitive game. I also really like in Camel Up that you can bet on the loser. You can kind of guess who you think will be the losing camel at the end of the game. And that can benefit you just as much as guessing the winner. I thought that was a clever twist. That's Camel Up, my number 6. My number 5, we're on the top 5 now. A friend has this game in my same building, but I don't have it offhand. That game is Fresco. Fresco is a game that heavily influenced viticulture, in that in Fresco there is a wake-up track, and viticulture there's also a wake-up track. And Fresco, it's a huge part of the game, and in the order in which you're choosing to wake up your workers, it impacts several phases of the game that follow it, and whether or not you wake up early or late determines, I believe it's the amount of money that you have to pay your workers every round. It's been a little while since I played it, but it was a huge influence on viticulture, and it's one of those games that I still, if someone wanted to get to the table, which doesn't happen all that often with Fresco anymore, but I would be eager to play it. It was one of my go-to games to teach, like a kind of lower medium weight game that is super easy to teach. In that it kind of evolves over the course of the game in terms of how you need to play. You can teach just like one aspect of the game and then move on to the next aspect and then the next aspect. That's Fresco, my number 5. My number 4 game, Azul. Azul is another game with a really wonderful sense of progression in terms of the points that you're gaining. You start off early in the game, maybe only gaining 1 or 2 points in the first round, but in the final round, you might gain 40, 50, 60 points. I love that progression of points. It reminds me a little bit of Russian railroads in terms of that progression of points over the course of the game. In Azul, I think my favorite mechanism is the idea that when you're drafting tiles, so it's a public draft, you're choosing one tile and picking up, I used the wrong word, they're tokens and tiles. You're picking up a number of tokens off of a tile that are the same as one another, and then you're putting the rest of them in the middle of the table into kind of a new pile or tile that you're forming. And then at a certain point, or really at any time on your turn, instead of choosing one of those tiles, you can choose to take all tokens of the same color from that common pile in the middle that you're forming. So all players are impacting the tiles or the tokens that are going into that common pool, which ends up being a good thing at certain times. You might want a bunch of tiles to fill up your 5 row, for example. But at certain times, you really don't want to get tiles from that middle area because you might end up with too many and get some negative points. So I really like the different types of player interaction and the timing of the choices and everything that goes into that middle section. The idea that the tile that you choose impacts what the other players can choose from and the number of points that they get each round. That's Azul, my number 4. My number 3, let's see, we're getting to 3 games that I own. The top 3 games I actually own here. My number 3 is The Mind. The Mind is like kind of my go-to, easy to travel with game, easy to teach game. It's just kind of a weird game too, but it's so easy to just play and share and have this kind of weird experience with friends and family. Introduced to family this past Christmas. In The Mind, you have a hand of cards. You start off with just one card. Over the course of the game, you accumulate more and more. They are numbered 1 through 100, and you are trying as a group to play them in order, in ascending order, without playing a card out of order. And you can't talk to each other. You can't communicate. You have to kind of just read nonverbal cues, but even less than that, because you cannot communicate at all in terms of what you have in your hand and what you're trying to play. So I really like just kind of the groupthink, the non-spoken communication. It's just kind of you're syncing with other players in a weird way that I haven't felt in other games. I also like the progression in the game. It in most rounds of the game, you gain something if you get past it. So you only lose the game if you run out of lives during the course of a round. If you get past a round, even if you didn't do well in that round, as long as you have lives left, you get to continue to progress in the game. And I really like that about The Mind. I like there's also a little reward. So you're not just surviving, but you're actually getting better. You're gaining a little bonus if you make it out of most of the rounds in the game. So I really like that about my number 3 game, The Mind. My number 2 game, this is a pretty tough choice because this game has rapidly become one of my favorites, but I'm going to put it at my number 2, and that is Just One. Just One, it's just begging to be the number 1 game based on the name. But in Just One, it's a fully cooperative party game, which I think is exceptionally rare. It's truly fully cooperative. You take turns being a player who's trying to guess a word, and all other players are writing down one word. It's always just one, writing down one word to try to get me to guess that word. And if any of you who are writing down the clues end up writing down the same word, you have to hide them. I don't get to see them. And then I have to try to guess what the one word is, and I get one guess because it's just one. And it's just a wonderful cooperative experience. I've played this with gamers, with non-gamers. It's super, super easy to teach, and it's led to the type of moments that I had with Telestrations for years as kind of a go-to large group social party game, and continue to. But Just One has replaced it to a certain extent because there is a sense of winning. I think that might be part of it. It's a fully cooperative game, so there is a sense of winning Just One. You can have that feeling of winning. Whereas in Telestration, it's more of an activity. You're just doing it to be silly and fun and laugh, which is great too. But I like that you get all those moments with Just One as well. And actually, one of my favorite things about this game is that there are moments in the game where a bunch of clues are canceled, and someone is left with very few clues, and they somehow get it. And it's just this brilliant thing that happens that we're like, how did you actually get that from these clues that were remaining, and you somehow got it. I've had that happen several times over the course of playing many, many games of Just One, and it just leads to these wonderful moments of camaraderie and cheering for each other that I really love for. However, as much as I love Just One as my number 2 game, I'm going to go with Scotland Yard as my number 1. I continue to just absolutely love Scotland Yard, even though this is my childhood copy of the game. This is an old version of Scotland Yard, but I continue to get it out and play it. It is so easy to teach. I should tell you what it is in case you don't know. Scotland Yard is a one versus many game, hidden movement game, a genre that I generally don't even really enjoy all that much, but this is hidden movement distilled down to its core, and I think it works so well. Where there's one player, Mr. or Mrs. X, who's running around London, sometimes appearing, sometimes not appearing, but usually not appearing, and the other players are using as many skills as they can to try to narrow down where Mr. X is and land on the same space as him or her. But the thing that really makes this work, other than it being super easy to teach because of how distilled it is how early in the game, we'll call him Mr. X, if I say I'm playing Mr. X, how early in the game Mr. X becomes visible. I think it's on the third turn of the game. Yeah, third turn of the game. Mr. X shows up. You have to see where Mr. X is. And I love that, because oftentimes in these hidden movement games, I feel like I'm stumbling around in the dark for too long without any information at all, or enough information to really make any interesting choices. But I love in Scotland Yard that really early on in the game, you know exactly where Mr. X is, and then he disappears again. But that little dose of information just, it keeps me engaged right from the beginning of the game. And I love that, instead of me feeling like I'm stumbling around in the dark. I love this is a game that makes me feel mischievous when I play Mr. X, and I love the camaraderie that happens when I'm on the team competing against Mr. X. I love both sides of it. It's a wonderful classic game. I was surprised I wasn't surprised it was on the list, but I didn't realize that the award went all the way back to like 1982, 1983. I think this is the 1983 game maybe. But I think it's well deserved. It is just a wonderful, wonderful game, and I'm glad it's still in print, because it's my favorite one versus many game. It's my favorite hidden movement game. It's favorite in so many different categories, and that's why it is my #1 game. That it was a German Game of the Year winner many years ago. So yeah, those are my top 10 games, my top 10 German Game of the Year award nominees and/or winners over the years. I'd love to hear yours. I'll post a link in the comments so you can go down and look. There's a Wikipedia page that does have the different types of awards that they now give out every year. So focus on just the Game of the Year award if you want to share your top 3, your top 5, your top 10, anything you'd like, or comment on the games that I've mentioned below or mentioned today. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for joining me, and root for Wingspan. Wingspan, we're hoping that'll win the Kenner Spiel. And Elizabeth is there, too, in Germany. Elizabeth has gone to Germany in the hopes of winning the award, and I really hope she does. It would actually be huge for my company if it does, too, so I'm excited for that. Not Game of the Year, but Kenner Spiel of the year. Yeah, that's it. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Thanks.